I paid $15 for a Chipotle bowl last week. Same bowl I always get. The problem with that is, just recently, that bowl was no more than $9 just a few years ago. Now the bowl didn't get any better. Quite honestly, it might have gotten worse. The portions, they quite literally got smaller. And the biggest issue is that the price nearly doubled. Now one of the issues here is, quite honestly, I almost didn't think about it. I kind of just went about my life just like everyone else does and just decides, hey, that's what the price is. I guess I'm gonna have to pay it because honestly, I have no other option. But I wanna ask you one thing. When was the last time that a price rose and then at some point the prices went back down to the old normal? Here's what nobody is telling you. It's not just inflation that's causing these issues. There is a specific deliberate reason why these prices are going up. And the people who control these prices are hoping that you don't figure it out. This is what the video is about. And by the end of it, the next time a price goes up on something that you buy, you're gonna understand exactly why and what you can ultimately do about it. Let me paint you a picture of what's ultimately gonna sound very familiar to you. Your grocery bill has been creeping for months, and you're not buying anything different than you normally buy. And in most cases, it's normally $20, $30, or in some cases even $40 more than what you normally pay in previous months. So you make a decision. You ultimately go somewhere else with your money and you'll go somewhere cheaper. You do a little research, maybe you drive a little bit further, walk into a different store and ultimately feel a bit smarter after that decision. Does that sound familiar? For most people it will. Except there's a very good chance that you might have actually just handed your money to the exact same company that you just left from. In North America specifically, every major chain tracks back to either 3 or 4 major companies. Think about any time you walk down an aisle. Shampoo, toothpaste, cereal, any of the products that you would normally go to the store for. Pick up 10 completely unrelated items. And in most cases, if you check the facts, it's normally owned by about 8 to 11 conglomerate corporations. Nestle, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Mars. Hundreds of brands across dozens of unrelated items. Mars, the chocolate company, owns dozens of veterinary clinics. Why, you might ask? Well, it's just because they can. So here's what that ultimately means for you specifically. If Tide gets too expensive, and let's just say you switch to Gain or Downing, you're still paying Procter & Gamble. If you leave one grocery chain for another, it's just one corporation with a different sign. Think of it like a casino. Every table looks completely different. Different games, different dealers, different energy. It feels like endless options, but at the end of the night, all the money ends up going to the same house. The house always wins because they own all the tables. This is what consumer choice looks like across almost all industries. This is called an oligopoly, which is a small group of companies controlling the market so completely that the competition is virtually dead. And when competition dies, there is nothing left stopping them from charging whatever they possibly want. Because here is the question that nobody ever asks. Why have companies ever been fair with you? Why has any company ever lowered a price? The answer is competition. That is always the answer. Simply put, the fear, if they do not, you will take your business elsewhere. Take away competition and they do not have to do a single thing. They can just exist. But here's what really gets me. Oligopolies alone still don't fully explain why prices are the way that they are. For that, we need to take a flashback to 2020. Think back to when everything shut down overnight. Supply chains collapsed, shelves went empty. At that point, there were real legitimate reasons why prices needed to increase. Semiconductors hit car manufacturing, fuel costs exploded, fertilizer shortages hit food, and we were all told the same exact thing. This is temporary. Things will normalize. Everything will go back to normal. So let me ask you directly. Have prices went back to normal? And have prices came down? Not even a little bit. Now, car prices are the clearest example. The semiconductor shortage caused a new car crunch, and that was resolved by 2023. Manufacturers are ultimately back to full production. And yet, the prices of a new Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic, the two cars that have been deemed the affordability vehicle, now start in most cases at a base $30,000. Now, if you take a look at any used cars that used to be $5,000 to $6,000, they start at around $15,000. And don't just take my word for it. You're welcome to check any sort of Facebook Marketplace or any other site that sells vehicles, and that fact will reign true. Here is the exact reason why. And I want you to really picture this, because once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Imagine a coffee shop. Normally charges $3, and they sell 500 cups a day. A shortage hits, and they can only now sell 200 cups a day. So they raise the price to $6. Makes complete sense. Lower supply, same demand. We all get that. But then the shortage ends. They are back to full supply. And then they look around and they still realize that people are still willing to pay that same $6 that they inflated the prices to. In this case, nobody complained loud enough to ensure that the business dropped the prices back to where they were before the shortage. Now, if you were the coffee shop owner, what would you do? Would you keep prices at $6 because no one is complaining about the prices, ensuring you're making more profit? Or would you go back down to the $3 that you were originally charging? This is not a supply chain problem anymore. That is a decision. A deliberate business decision to continue to charge more because nobody has stopped. And once you see that mechanism, you will see it everywhere. Small affordable cars have mostly vanished from dealership lots because the profit margins on those are ultimately very thin. To that point, manufacturers also stopped making those vehicles. They shifted to fewer cars at higher price points, loaded with features that customers don't ultimately want or need. So when someone tells you car prices are high because of supply chain issues, that excuse ran out in 2023. The prices did not. Every other industry watched what car manufacturers did and took notes. But nowhere is it harder to defend than grocery. Grocery prices in North America are up almost 30% over the last 5 years. We were handed the same explanations: pandemic disruptions, fuel costs, and climate affecting crops. And to be completely honest, of course, some of that did have an effect on prices. I am not dismissing that by any means. But here are what those explanations cannot account for. Those situations have certainly improved. Some have even fully restored. And grocery prices, for the most part, have not ticked downward. If the reasons for pricing increasing no longer exist, why are prices still up? Because the reasons were never actually the reasons. Grocery chain profits, record highs, year after year, during the same exact period where you were told at the checkout counter there was no longer any choice to charge you more. And here's the part that I generally could not believe whenever I found it. In 2023, in Canada, the largest grocery chain manufacturer pleaded guilty to criminal price fixing. They had spent 14 years, yes, 14 years, secretly colluding with bread manufacturers to purposefully inflate the cost of bread. 14 years, not a mistake, not an oversight, a deliberate, sustained criminal action to take more of your money. And remember, that is only the version of the story where they actually got caught. How many versions of that story never got caught? Here's the pattern. And once you see it, you'll be able to recognize it in every facet of your life moving forward. Think of it like a slow leak in a car tire. You don't notice it on Monday. Tuesday feels fine. Wednesday, it's a little soft, but probably nothing. By Friday, you're sitting on a flat tire wondering when that quite possibly might have happened. Every small price increase, every product that quietly shrank while prices stayed the same, every subscription that you got an email for that went up by $2 without you even realizing. That is the small leak, and most of us just continued driving without even knowing it was there. So that is exactly what is happening. And I know what you're thinking right now. Great, now I'm even more angry. What am I actually supposed to do about these trillion-dollar corporations? And that's exactly where I'm going next. Because there is something that you can do. And it is the one thing that these companies genuinely did not account for. Now I know, these are trillion-dollar corporations. What can you really do? Write a strongly worded letter? These companies have survived far worse. Viral outrage, bad press, viral moments, congressional hearings, investigative journalism, and the prices haven't moved a single cent. So what has actually worked? What is the one thing that actually forced a company to lower their prices? Simply put, when people stop buying. In the simplest of terms, that's it. Demand drops, prices follow. And that is not an opinion. That is the most fundamental rule of how every market operates. And that is the one lever in your hand that almost everybody has forgot they've had in their back pocket. Think of it like a restaurant parking lot. When the lot is always full, that business has no incentive to run a happy hour or any sort of incentive. They're simply at capacity without doing anything. They don't need you specifically. But the second that lot is half empty on a Tuesday night, suddenly at that point there are specials on board. Your predictability fills their lots, and that same unpredictability is the only thing that'll create a discount. Now in practice, this is way simpler than what it sounds. Using a product in full before you ultimately replace it. Wearing clothes until they actually wear out. Now maybe a hot take, but the carbs, driving your car until it's actually about to die, and not deciding to upgrade to the newest model the moment you go in for an oil change. Fixing things instead of replacing things, cooking instead of ordering, canceling that pesky subscription that's been set up on autopay. Be completely honest with me. You probably have a handful of subscriptions that you haven't used in the past month that you're still paying a recurring charge for. I can name about 3 that I personally have. None of what I've described is a completely radical change. That's just life before we started buying all brand new things. Capitalism's worst nightmare is someone that's completely at peace with what they currently have. Every price increase is completely irrelevant to that person. Every marketing dollar is completely wasted trying to reach that specific person because they've opted out of the entire game. So here's what I actually want you to take from this video. The next time that you go out to buy something that you regularly use, just pause for a brief moment before you just absorb and ask yourself one simple question. Do you actually need this right now in this very moment? And then ask yourself, is the cheaper alternative just the exact same company with a different label? And if the honest answer to that question is you are overpaying for a product that has just a different label on it, just simply consider not buying it. Now, you or me will not ultimately fix corporate greed, but you can decide how much of your money you give to that. And unlike everything else in this world, that choice is completely yours.